In a small village, a couple was legendary. The husband was 102, his wife 98, and both still working their farm daily, looking decades younger. One day, a visitor spotted the old man chopping wood shirtless, muscles toned, sweat gleaming under the sun. "Excuse me," said the visitor. "Are you really 102? "That's right," the old man replied with a grin. "Incredible! You look amazing for your age." "Thank you," the old man chuckled. "What's your secret?" The old man wiped his brow. "Help me carry this wood back to the house, and I'll tell you." As they walked, the old man explained, "When my wife and I married 75 years ago, we made a deal. Every time we argued, whoever lost had to run 5 kilometers. And well, like most marriages, I've been running nearly every day since." The visitor laughed, then asked, "But your wife looks just as fit. How does she do it?" The old man grinned. "Simple. She usually runs after me to make sure I don't cheat and skip a lap." A widower, freshly retired, bought a cozy house near a high school, looking forward to some peace and quiet. For the first few weeks, life was blissful, until the new school year began. One afternoon, 3 boys strolled down the street, gleefully banging on every trash bin they passed. The clatter echoed through the neighborhood. They returned the next day and the next, for a full week. Fed up but crafty, the widower hatched a plan. The following afternoon, he stopped the boys mid-bang and said, "You know, when I was your age, I used to do the exact same thing. It was a blast. In fact, I'll pay each of you $1 if you come by every day and keep it up." The boys, thrilled at the idea of being paid to make noise, eagerly agreed. A few days later, the widower came out again, looking a bit downcast. "Boys, the economy's hitting me hard. I can only pay you 50 cents each from now on." The kids grumbled but kept banging. Money was money after all. Another few days passed, and the old man returned once more. "I hate to say it," he sighed, "but things are even tighter now. I can only afford 25 cents each." The boys stopped, outraged. 25 cents? The leader scoffed. "No way we're doing this for that. We're not wasting our time for peanuts." And with that, they stormed off, leaving the old man to enjoy his retirement in perfect peace and quiet. 1. Aerobics for seniors. I realized my body was completely out of shape, so I got my doctor's okay to join a fitness club. I signed up for a senior aerobics class. I bent, twisted, gyrated, jumped up and down, and sweated for an hour. But by the time I got my leotard on, the class was over. 2. Having an affair. I quietly confided to my best friend, "I'm having an affair." She paused, then asked, "Ooh, are you having it catered?" And that, my friend, is the true definition of old. 3. Memory loss. My memory isn't as sharp as it used to be. Also, my memory isn't as sharp as it used to be. 4. Preventing sagging. Want to stop sagging? Simple. Just eat until the wrinkles fill out. 5. Aging gracefully. I've sure gotten old. I've had 2 bypasses, a hip replacement, new knees, battled prostate cancer, and diabetes. I'm half blind, can't hear anything quieter than a jet engine, and take 40 medications that make me dizzy, breathless, and prone to blackouts. I struggle with dementia, have poor circulation, and can't feel my hands or feet. I don't even remember if I'm 85 or 92. But thank God, I still have my driver's license. 6. Ashes at Walmart. An elderly woman was planning her will and told her preacher, "I have 2 final requests. First, I want to be cremated. Second, I want my ashes scattered over Walmart." "Walmart?" the preacher asked, confused. "Why there?" She smiled. "Because these days half the stuff in my cart says, 'for fast relief.'" A little old lady checked into a motel on her 70th birthday, feeling a bit lonely. She thought, "Why not? It's my birthday." She flipped through the phone book and spotted a full-page ad, Tender Tony, a handsome escort offering sensual massages. His photo showed him flexing, 6-pack abs, wavy hair, strong legs, a dazzling smile, the kind of man you could bounce a quarter off his butt. "What the heck?" she thought. "No one will ever know." She nervously dialed the number. "Good evening, ma'am. How may I help you?" came a smooth, sensual voice. Flustered but determined, she blurted, "Hi, I want a massage." "No, forget that. I want everything. I'm alone, I'm ready, and I want it hot and heavy. Bring rubber, leather, whips, the whole bag of tricks. Tie me up, cover me in chocolate syrup and whipped cream. I want it all. So, how does that sound?" There was a slight pause before the man replied gently, "That sounds amazing, madam, but you need to press 9 for an outside line." Dear granddaughter, you won't believe the heartwarming experience I had the other day. I decided to swing by our local Christian bookstore after an exhilarating choir performance and an especially powerful prayer meeting. I was feeling on top of the world, all filled with the Holy Spirit, when I spotted this adorable bumper sticker that read, "Honk if you love Jesus." Well, I couldn't resist. I bought it and proudly slapped it on my car. Not long after, I found myself at a busy intersection, waiting at a red light. I got a bit lost in thought, reflecting on the Lord's goodness, humming a hymn, and feeling truly blessed. That's when I heard it, the loudest, most enthusiastic honk. Someone must have seen my sticker. I smiled, thinking, well, isn't that sweet? Another soul-loving Jesus? But it didn't stop there. More honks followed. People were really loving Jesus that day. The man behind me was especially passionate. He leaned out of his window, waving frantically, and shouted, "For the love of God, go, go, go! Jesus Christ, go!" I was so touched by his enthusiasm, a real cheerleader for the Lord. Soon the entire intersection joined in, horns blaring everywhere. I felt like I had accidentally started a mobile revival. I leaned out of my window, waving and smiling, sharing the love. I even honked my own horn a couple of times to join the chorus. Then I heard someone yell something about a sunny beach. I think he must have been from Florida. And another kind soul waved at me in such a unique way, just one finger raised. Curious, I asked my teenage grandson in the back seat what that sign meant. He giggled and said, "Oh, Grandma, that's probably a Hawaiian good luck sign." I'd never been to Hawaii or met anyone from there, so I thought, why not spread some good luck back? I leaned out the window and proudly gave the man the same gesture. My grandson nearly fell out of his seat laughing. What a joyful moment. A few people even got out of their cars and started walking toward me. I figured they wanted to pray together or ask what church I went to. That's when I finally noticed. The light had turned green a while ago. I waved goodbye to all my new friends, flashed them the Hawaiian good luck sign one last time, and drove through the intersection just before the light turned red again. I felt a little sad leaving behind all those lovely folks, but oh, what a blessed time we had. Praise the Lord for bringing so many people together that day. With love, Grandma. The secret to a long life or something else? A TV crew decided to film a special segment on longevity and set off to visit a legendary figure, an old man who had just celebrated his 100th birthday. The twist? He lived alone in a remote cabin deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. When they arrived, they found the centenarian chopping wood, his axe swinging with the strength and precision of a man half his age. His posture was upright, muscles toned, and his face barely showed a wrinkle. If someone had guessed his age, they'd have said 40, 50 tops. The crew stood there in awe before the reporter finally approached him. "Sir, you're 100 years old, living all by yourself out here, and you're as fit as someone in their prime. What's your secret?" The old man leaned on his axe, smiled thoughtfully, and said, "Well, let me tell you a story." The crew, expecting a heartwarming tale of clean living and wisdom, rolled the cameras. 70 years ago, during a calm winter, a blizzard rolled in out of nowhere. It wasn't too cold at first, just light snow, but then the wind picked up, hard. Visibility dropped to nothing. I went outside to call for my dog when I noticed a faint flicker of light deep in the woods. I knew someone had to be out there, lost and in trouble. I started shouting, hoping whoever it was could hear me. Sure enough, the light grew stronger, swaying through the storm. Eventually, a man emerged, clutching a flashlight, barely able to stand. I pulled him inside the cabin, my dog running in right after. The door nearly flew off its hinges from the wind, but I slammed it shut just in time. The poor guy was freezing and in shock. I helped him peel off his soaked jacket and boots, sat him by the fire, and poured us both some whiskey to calm the nerves. I ladled out some stew I had simmering, and slowly he started to come around. He thanked me profusely, saying he was sure he wouldn't have made it if he hadn't heard me calling for my dog. We talked for a bit, but it was late and the storm raged on. When it was time to sleep, there was only one bed. We both figured, no big deal. It's freezing. We'll share for warmth. The old man paused, staring into the distance, as if reliving the moment. Well, he continued, one thing led to another, and, we started, touching, then kissing, and eventually, we made love. The TV crew froze. The cameraman's hand trembled slightly, trying not to drop the camera. In the morning, the old man went on casually, the storm had passed. He got dressed and said he had to get back. His wife and 3 kids would be worried sick. Before he left, he gave me the juiciest kiss on the cheek and disappeared into the woods. I never even asked his name. That was the last time I saw him. An awkward silence filled the air. The reporter blinked, mouth half open, before stammering, that's quite a story, but actually we meant, what's your secret to living such a long and active life? The old man chuckled, waving his hand dismissively. Oh, that? Clean air, regular exercise, healthy food, and absolutely no stress. Works like a charm. The crew exchanged wide-eyed glances. The cameraman mouthed, "Did that really just happen?" The old man picked up his axe and returned to chopping wood, leaving the stunned TV crew standing there, wondering if they had just filmed a segment on longevity or something entirely different. It was a blistering hot afternoon when old Scrooge the miser and his grandson, little Tim, trudged along the sidewalk, heading home from a neighborhood party. The sun was relentless, the pavement shimmering under its heat, and poor Tim was practically melting. "Gramps," Tim whined, wiping sweat off his brow, "it's still a long way back to our house. I'm hot, I'm tired, and my feet hurt. Look, there's a bus stop. Can we please take the bus home?" Scrooge stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes wide with horror, as if Tim had just suggested they buy a yacht. "The bus? From here? That'll cost us $6. $6! Do you know what $6 can buy? That's practically robbery!" Tim sighed, shoulders slumping. He was used to his grandfather's tight-fisted ways. "All right, Gramps. We'll walk," he muttered, trying not to think about the long, sweaty trek ahead. They hadn't made it more than a few feet when Scrooge's hand shot up, waving frantically at an approaching taxi. "Hey, taxi!" he hollered. The cab screeched to a halt next to them. The driver rolled down his window, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. "Where to?" "Springfield Avenue," Scrooge replied, straightening his back with an air of importance. "How much will that set us back?" The driver barely paused. "Springfield? That'll be about $20. Scrooge let out a gasp so sharp it could have sliced the air. $20 for one trip? That's highway robbery. He stepped back, waving the cab off. "No thanks, we'll walk." The taxi sped away, leaving a puff of exhaust in its wake. Tim stood there, hands on his hips, his face a mix of exhaustion and pure confusion. "Gramps," he started, trying to keep his cool, "did you really think the taxi was going to cost less than the bus?" Scrooge scoffed, as if the answer was painfully obvious. "Of course not. Don't be ridiculous." Tim blinked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Then why did you flag it down?" Scrooge beamed proudly, as if he were about to impart ancient wisdom. "Simple, my boy. We saved $6 by not taking the bus. Now we've saved $20 by not taking the taxi. That's $26 in savings, just like that." Tim stared at his grandfather, utterly speechless, while sweat dripped from his temples. "See?" Scrooge grinned. "Smart saving is all about the little choices." Tim sighed deeply. "At this rate, Gramps, we'll be millionaires by the time we pass out from heat stroke." But Scrooge, undeterred, was already calculating how much they'd save by not buying ice cream on the way home. Jack, 92, and Jill, 89, living in Nelson, are over the moon about their decision to get married. While out for a stroll discussing wedding plans, they pass a chemist. Jack stops and says, "Let's pop in." Inside, Jack approaches the pharmacist. "Are you the owner?" "I am," replies the pharmacist. Jack smiles. "Great. We're getting married and we have a question. Do you sell heart medication?" "Of course," says the pharmacist. "How about circulation pills?" "All kinds." "Rheumatism meds?" "Absolutely." "Suppositories?" "You bet. Memory boosters, arthritis treatments, Alzheimer's meds?" "We've got them all. Vitamins, sleeping pills, Parkinson's antidotes. Yes, yes, and yes, but why?" Jack grins, grabs Gil's hand, and says, "We'd like to set up our wedding registry here." Two 80-year-old pensioners decide to take a trip down memory lane, returning to the spot where they first met. Sitting at a cafe, the old man says, "Remember over 50 years ago? We left this cafe, went behind the gasworks, and I gave you the thrill of your life." The old lady smiles. "Oh, I remember it well." "Well," he grins, "for old time's sake, shall we do it again?" They pay the bill and head off. A young man at the next table, having overheard, thinks, "This I gotta see." So he follows them. Sure enough, behind the gasworks, the old lady lifts her dress, pulls down her knickers, and grabs the fence. The old man drops his trousers, grabs her hips, and what follows is 10 minutes of the wildest, most intense love-making the young man has ever witnessed, limbs flying, dust kicking up, non-stop action. Finally, they both collapse, breathless, and lie there for nearly an hour. The young man, stunned, approaches the old man. "Sir, I've never seen anything like that, especially at your age. What's your secret? Were you this good 50 years ago?" The old man wipes his brow and says, "Not really, son. Back then, the fence wasn't electrified." After his checkup, the doctor says to the elderly man, "You're in great shape for your age. Any concerns you'd like to discuss?" The old man nods. "Well, Doc, after I make love to my wife the first time, I'm hot and sweaty, but after the second time, I'm cold and chilly." Puzzled, the doctor checks over the man's wife and finds nothing wrong. He asks her, "Your husband mentioned something odd. He says after the first time he's hot and sweaty, but after the second time he's cold and chilly. Any idea why?" She rolls her eyes. "Oh, that old fool. That's because the first time is in August and the second time is in January." An elderly man accidentally rear-ends a young guy driving an expensive sports car. Furious, the young man jumps out, shouting, "Look at my car! You just wrecked it! You owe me $10,000 right now, or I'm going to beat you to a pulp!" The old man, shaken, replies, "Oh dear, I don't have that kind of money, but let me call my son. He trains dolphins. He'll know what to do." "Dolphins?" The young man scoffs, rolling his eyes. The old man dials his son, but before he can speak, the furious driver snatches the phone. "So you're a dolphin trainer? Well, your old man just smashed my car, and unless you can train those dolphins to cough up 10 grand, I'm gonna beat him, and you, senseless." There's a pause, then a calm voice replies, "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes later, a pickup truck screeches to a stop. Out steps a massive guy built like a tank. Without a word, he walks straight up to the angry driver and headbutts him, knocking him out cold. The young man crumples to the ground like a rag doll. The big guy turns to his dad and sighs, "Dad, for the last time. I train SEALs, Navy SEALs, not dolphins." A young engineer, fresh out of MIT, sat nervously in a sleek corporate office, finishing up his first big job interview. The human resources officer glanced over his resume, then leaned back in his chair. "So," the HR officer began, "what kind of starting salary are you expecting?" The young engineer, eager but trying to sound confident, replied, "I was thinking somewhere around $125,000 a year, depending on the benefits package." The interviewer raised an eyebrow but kept a straight face. All right. How about this? 5 weeks of vacation, 14 paid holidays, full medical and dental coverage, a retirement plan with company matching up to 50% of your salary, and let's throw in a company car leased every 2 years. Say, a red Corvette." The engineer's eyes widened. He sat up straighter, excitement bubbling over. "Wow, are you serious?" The interviewer chuckled and leaned forward. "Nope, but you started it." One day at college, Johnny spotted a gorgeous girl walking past him. Feeling bold, he smirked and asked, "Hey, what would you think of me if I squeezed your chest and ran away?" The girl, without missing a beat, smiled and replied, I would think that there was a fool who could drive the whole car but ran off after just honking the horn. It was a quiet afternoon in Florida when Joshua picked up the phone and dialed his son Benny in New York. The old man sighed deeply, rehearsing his lines one last time before the call connected. "Hello, Dad?" Benny answered, cheerful as always. "Benny," Joshua began, his voice heavy with fake sorrow. "I have something to tell you, but I don't want to discuss it. I'm only calling because you're my oldest, and I thought you should know." Benny immediately sat up straight, sensing something serious. "Dad, what's going on?" Joshua sighed dramatically. "I've made up my mind. I'm divorcing your mother." Benny nearly dropped the phone. "What? Dad, you can't be serious after 54 years? What happened?" "I don't want to get into it," Joshua mumbled, his tone dripping with faux pain. "It's too hard to talk about. I've been agonizing over this for days, but my mind is made up. Dad, come on. You can't just drop a bombshell like that and not explain. Where's Mom? Can I talk to her?" No, I haven't told her yet," Joshua said quickly. "It's too painful. I just wanted you to know. I'm seeing a lawyer the day after tomorrow." "Dad, no, don't do anything rash. I'm taking the first flight down. Promise me you won't make any moves until I get there." "Well, all right," Joshua replied, pretending to hesitate. "I'll wait, but it's not easy, Benny." "Good. I'll call Sarah and tell her too. We'll both come." Fine, call your sister. I can't bear to go through this again." 30 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was Sarah from New Jersey, her voice urgent and emotional. "Dad, Benny told me everything. We both managed to get tickets. We're coming with the kids. We'll be there the day after tomorrow." Joshua put on his best, heartbroken voice. "Oh, Sarah, I don't want to put you all through this." "Dad, stop. Promise me you won't do anything until we get there." "I promise," Joshua said solemnly. As soon as he hung up, Joshua leaned back in his recliner, grinning ear to ear. He turned to his wife, Esther, who'd been eavesdropping from the kitchen. "You were right," Joshua chuckled. "They're coming down for the holiday, and we didn't even have to pay for their plane tickets." Old Bubba was spending a lazy afternoon fishing along the bayou, hoping to snag some big catfish. The sun was high, the water still, and Bubba sat on the bank with his line in the water and a bottle of Daddy's homemade moonshine in his pocket. As he sat there, he noticed a ripple across the surface. Glancing up, he spotted a water moccasin slithering by, a fat toad clamped in its jaws. Now, Bubba had been fishing these waters for years and knew that toads made the best bait for hooking monster catfish. Without hesitating, he lunged forward and grabbed the snake just behind the head, careful not to get bitten. With a quick flick, he pried the toad from the snake's mouth and slipped it into his bait bag. But then he had a problem, an angry, venomous snake writhing in his hands. Thinking fast, Bubba reached into his pocket, pulled out his trusty bottle of Daddy's moonshine, and uncorked it. "Easy now," he muttered, tipping the bottle and dripping 2 drops of the potent brew into the snake's mouth. The snake's eyes widened, then glazed over. Its whole body went limp, as if it had just discovered inner peace. Bubba chuckled, gently placed the snake back in the water, and went back to fishing. A few hours passed, and Bubba was just about ready to call it a day when he felt something tapping against his boot. He looked down, and there was the same water moccasin swaying slightly with 2 fat frogs hanging from its mouth. It stared up at Bubba as if to say, "Another round on me." 2 women were catching up over coffee, swapping stories about the struggles of running a small business. "I opened my own practice last year," said Sarah, stirring her drink. "And I made a rule. Every employee has to take at least 1 full week off every 3 months. Her friend, Lisa, raised an eyebrow. "That's generous. But why would you do that? Doesn't it mess up your workflow?" Sarah smirked. "Not at all. It's the easiest way to figure out which employees I can live without." Lisa nearly spat out her coffee. "Savage, but smart." A woman named Mrs. Terry visited her doctor's clinic for a routine checkup. She was 63 years old, a mother of 4, and a proud grandmother of 7. After being called in, she sat down in the exam room with one of the older doctors. Barely 4 minutes into the appointment, the door suddenly flew open. Mrs. Terry bolted out, screaming, her face pale with shock as she ran down the hallway. A young doctor passing by quickly stopped her. "Mrs. Terry, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Breathing heavily, she stammered, "That doctor, he just told me I'm pregnant." The young doctor, stunned, helped her into a chair and tried to calm her down. Once she was settled, he marched straight into the exam room where the older doctor was calmly writing notes. "Seriously? She's 63, 4 kids, 7 grandkids. And you told her she's pregnant? What were you thinking?" The older doctor didn't even look up from his clipboard. With a small grin, he said, "Cured her hiccups, though, didn't it?" It was a cloudy afternoon in Seattle as passengers boarded a packed flight heading south. Among them were 2 attorneys, both sharply dressed in suits that screamed ambition. They found their seats near the back of the plane, one by the window, the other in the middle seat. Just before takeoff, a physician boarded, carrying a worn leather bag and looking like he'd just come off a long shift. Spotting the aisle seat next to the attorneys, he settled in, kicked off his shoes, and wiggled his toes, finally relaxing for what he hoped would be a peaceful flight. Moments later, the attorney by the window stretched and said, "I could really use a Coke." Before he could unbuckle, the physician smiled. "No problem, I'll grab it for you." He stood up, leaving his shoes behind, and headed down the aisle. As soon as he was out of sight, the 2 attorneys exchanged mischievous grins. The one by the window picked up one of the physician's shoes, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and spat right inside it. He placed it back as if nothing had happened. The physician soon returned with the Coke, handing it over cheerfully. "That looks refreshing," said the middle seat attorney. "I think I'll have one too." Again the physician obliged, standing up to fetch another drink. The second attorney seized the opportunity, grabbing the other shoe and spitting into it before placing it back under the seat. The physician returned, still none the wiser, and they all sat quietly for the remainder of the flight, sipping their drinks and making small talk as if nothing had happened. As the plane began its descent, the physician casually slipped his feet back into his shoes. Instantly, he could feel it, the unmistakable dampness, the betrayal. But instead of getting angry, he sighed deeply, shaking his head. Looking at the 2 attorneys with a calm but tired expression, he said, "How long must this go on? This endless rivalry, the hatred between our professions, the spitting in shoes, the pissing in Cokes?" In a brightly lit hospital room, 2 doctors, Dean and Gable, stood over a chart, reviewing the case of a middle-aged man named Frank, who sat on the exam table coughing into a tissue. His lungs wheezed with every breath, the years of smoking catching up to him, but it wasn't tobacco that had brought him there. "Frank," Dr. Dean began gently, "your lung condition has gotten worse, and honestly, the weed isn't helping." Frank frowned, waving off the concern. "But it's herbal. It's natural. How bad could it be?" Dr. Gable sighed, rubbing his temples before chiming in. "Frank, just because something's natural doesn't mean it's safe. Nature has plenty of ways to kill us." "Exactly," added Dr. Dean. "Apricot stones, lethal amounts of cyanide. And I've got a plant in my own backyard. If you sit under it for just 5 minutes, you'll die." Frank's eyes widened in horror. "No kidding. What kind of plant is that?" Dr. Gable crossed his arms. "Does it really matter? The point is, just because something's natural doesn't mean it's harmless." Frank finally seemed to get the message. All right. I'll quit the weed." The doctors nodded, satisfied, and after Frank left, they headed to the hospital cafeteria for lunch. Sitting down with their trays, Dr. Gable chuckled, picking at his salad. "You know," he said, "I've been meaning to ask, what is that plant in your backyard that kills you if you sit under it?" Dr. Dean didn't miss a beat. "A water lily." It was a brutal car accident, twisted metal, shattered glass, and the eerie silence that follows chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance as paramedics worked frantically, but despite their best efforts, 3 men, an American, a Scot, and a Canadian, were pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. In the emergency room, doctors and nurses solemnly prepared the bodies, attaching toe tags and recording the time of death. Just as a nurse reached for the American's tag, his hand twitched. "Doctor, he's moving!" she cried out. The room erupted in chaos as the medical team surrounded the gurney. The American's eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and awe. "What? What happened?" he croaked. The lead doctor leaned in, wide-eyed. "You were dead! We all saw it! How are you back?" The American took a shaky breath, gathering his thoughts. "I remember the crash, and then this bright, beautiful light. Next thing I knew, I was standing at the gates of heaven, with the Scot and the Canadian right beside me." The medical team hung on his every word. "Then St. Peter showed up," the American continued, "and he told us that we were all too young to die. But there was a catch. He said we could return to Earth, but it would cost us a $50 donation each." $50 to come back to life?" a nurse whispered in disbelief. The American nodded. "Well, I didn't waste a second. I pulled out my wallet, handed over the 50, and bam, I'm here." The doctor blinked, still trying to process it. "But what about the Scot and the Canadian?" The American sighed, shaking his head. "Last I saw them, the Scot was busy haggling over the price, trying to get it down to 25, and the Canadian, well, he was waiting for the government to cover it."